All right, let's jump into a puzzle that you've probably felt in your own life, even if you couldn't quite put your finger on it. It's this question of why some things can get crazy expensive almost overnight, while other stuff, well, the price barely moves.
Yeah, right? It's a great question. You see it all the time. A neighborhood suddenly gets popular and rents just explode. But you don't see new buildings popping up to meet that demand. Or think about a hot new gadget. The price is high, the lines are long. So what's the deal? What's going on behind the scenes? Well, it really boils down to a tale of two very different kinds of products. On one side, you've got something like a cup of coffee. You know, if a coffee shot gets slammed with the morning rush, what do? They just brew another pot. It takes minutes. That's a super quick response. But on the other side, you've got housing. If a whole city gets a big influx of people, building new homes takes years. You've got planning, permits, construction. It's an incredibly slow response. And that difference is everything.
Okay, so here's how we're going to crack this case. First, we'll stick with our two products. Then I'm going to introduce you to what I like to call the supply stretch test. From there, we'll explore these different worlds of elasticity, dig into what causes the supply bottlenecks, and then finally, we'll tie it all together and talk about why this really matters to you.
So, let's get right into it. We're setting the stage here, really digging into that fundamental mystery, that difference between the things we can get right away and the things that make us wait. The key that unlocks this entire puzzle actually has a name. It's called price elasticity of supply. Now, I know that sounds a little textbooky, but trust me, it's a really practical, powerful idea that explains a ton about the prices you and I pay every single day.
Which brings us to our second part, the supply stretch test. I want you to think of it like this. It's a way to measure how much the supply of something can, well, stretch when the price changes. Is that like a flexible rubber band, or is it more like a rigid steel bar?
Okay, so here's the official definition. Price elasticity of supply, we'll just call it PES. It's just a number that tells us how much the amount of stuff for sale changes when the price changes. And the formula? It's beautifully simple. You just take the percentage change in the quantity that's supplied and divide it by the percentage change in the price. That's it.
Now, the big thing to get here is that this isn't just a yes or no thing. It's not like supply is either stretchy or it isn't. It's a whole spectrum, all the way from totally rigid and unmoving on one end to basically infinitely flexible on the other. So let's walk through the 5 main types you'll see.
First up, we've got the most rigid of them all, perfectly inelastic. The PES value here is just 0, flat out 0. This means that no matter how ridiculously high the price goes, the amount available for sale doesn't budge, not one bit. The supply curve is literally just a vertical line. And the classic example? A one-of-a-kind painting, like something from Van Gogh. There's only one. We can't make more, no matter how much someone is willing to pay.
Next, we have inelastic supply. Its value is always less than 1. This is where you might see a pretty big jump in price, but it only leads to a teeny tiny increase in supply. That supply curve is really steep. This is the world of things that are really hard or take a long time to make, like building a nuclear power plant or, you guessed it, constructing new houses. The producers want to sell more when the price is high, but they physically can't ramp up that quickly.
Slap bang in the middle, you have unit elastic supply. Here, the PES is exactly 1. Everything is perfectly balanced. A 10% increase in the price, you get a 10% increase in the quantity supplied. It's that perfect, proportional, middle-of-the-road case.
Okay, now we're getting into the flexible stuff. With elastic supply, the value is greater than 1. Here, even a small bump in the price can cause a huge jump in how much is produced and sold. The supply curve starts to look a lot flatter. This is for things that are pretty easy to make, like textiles, or remember those fidget spinners? A perfect example. If prices start to rise, factories can just switch on more machines and churn them out.
And finally, we're at the other extreme, perfectly elastic supply. Here, the PES is literally infinity. Now, this is mostly a theoretical idea. It suggests that suppliers will sell you an infinite amount of something at one specific price, but absolutely nothing if the price changes even a little. It's a perfect ideal for sure, but some really competitive markets, like our coffee-to-go example, can get pretty darn close.
All right, theory time is over. Let's get into section 3 and see how this all actually plays out in the real world. Where do we find these different worlds of elasticity?
So the really important takeaway here is that some of the most essential things in our economy have inelastic supply. Housing is the big one, right? Because of all those planning rules and just how long it takes to build. Agriculture is another. You can't speed up Mother Nature. Crops grow on their own schedule. And then, of course, you have things that are just naturally limited, like land or gold. You can't just make more.
And this brings us to a super important equation for understanding how our world works. When you take inelastic supply, like you have in farming, and you mix it with demand that's always bouncing around, the result is one word: volatility. And this isn't just some abstract concept. It has huge, real-world impacts, especially for people like farmers.
And wow, this chart just says it all, doesn't it? Take a look at the price of corn here. In just a few months, the price almost doubles. This is exactly what happens when supply just can't keep up with changes in demand, or bad weather, or policy shifts. The price has to absorb the entire shock.
And that price roller coaster translates directly into an income roller coaster. This chart shows us farm income in the US, and you can just see it's all over the place. I mean, can you imagine trying to run a business or just plan for your family's future when your income could swing that wildly from one year to the next? That is the real human cost of inelastic supply.
Okay, so this brings up a pretty logical question, right? Why? What's actually causing this? What are the real-world bottlenecks that stop supply from being more flexible, more elastic?
Well, it really comes down to 5 main things. Number 1, and this is the big one, is time. The more time you give producers, the more they can adapt. Number 2 is spare capacity. If a factory is only running half its machines, it's pretty easy to ramp up production. 3 is inventory. If you got a warehouse full of stuff, you can respond instantly. 4 is just how complex it is to make something. A t-shirt is a lot simpler than a spaceship. And finally, number 5 is how mobile your resources are. How easy is it to switch from making one thing to making something else?
This quote right here really hits the nail on the head. It all comes down to time. In the short run, you can't just tell a farmer to grow more wheat tomorrow if they already planted corn. It's too late. But in the long run, like for the next planting season, sure, they can switch. Given enough time, businesses can build new factories, train people, and find new materials. Time makes everything more flexible.
All right, let's bring this all home. We've gone through the theory, we've seen the real-world examples. Now let's tie it all together and figure out why any of this actually matters in our day-to-day lives.
So here's the bottom line. Understanding this idea, the stretchiness of supply, it explains so much around us. It explains why housing markets in so many cities can feel completely broken. It explains why your grocery bill can suddenly jump. And it shows you the incredible challenge that businesses face every day trying to keep up with what we want. Because at the end of the day, when supply is inelastic, when it can't stretch, you get 2 things. You get scarcity and you get volatility. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to chew on. We've established that time and technology are the keys to making supply more elastic. So, what are the things in our world that feel really fixed and inelastic today that might just become super flexible and abundant tomorrow? Could it be clean energy, highly skilled labor, maybe even access to space? The answer to that is going to shape the world we live in.